This
when they are
conference will
called to
now be
consider.
recorded.
Yeah, I should note, yes, we are being recorded. Thank you, Barbara. But this is a meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's 5:30 on the 23rd of April of 2020. This is our first virtual meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I think the first public hearing that's going to be conducted on this format. But we have a few housekeeping things. Remember, the meeting is being recorded. Please mute your microphone unless you were going to talk. If you're online, this can be done once you are on the bottom of the screen. If you're on the phone calling in, you'll need to mute it through your phone, please. If you have a camera on your computer, please make sure it is turned on before the meeting starts. If you don't have a camera, you will appear as a black box with your name or initials in the box. We will do a verbal roll call of the board members before the meeting, not staff or visitors. I will be recognizing speakers verbally as not everybody is able to see each other. If you have questions, an easy way to get that going is by using the chat feature. If you look at the top of your screen, you'll see like the kind of cartoon word bubble. If you click on that, you can send a chat. That's how we're going to have you sign in to participate in the public hearing, those that are on the video. Let's see, once you're recognized, please count to 1 or 2. It's supposed to be nanoseconds of a delay, but sometimes it is a little bit bigger based upon individuals' technology and capabilities. Board members, when making a motion, please say your name at the start of the motion. For instance, Johnson moves, and then whoever would second would say Potts would second that motion. Then I will do a roll call for each vote. Members, I'd suggest you avoid the chat feature. Don't get caught up in any side conversations. I will be checking that just for those that want to sign up to speak. So when you sign up in the chat, please add your name as well as your address then for the public record. Any members have questions? If not, I'll do roll call. And I was going to say Davis, but he stepped out for a second. Shannon.
Present.
Carrie Johnson.
Here.
Larry Potts.
Present.
Andy Davis.
Present.
And Mayor Zeman, have you joined us? I do not hear Mayor Zeman, so we do have a quorum. We have 4 of the 5 members in attendance virtually here. The first order of business would be to ask for an approval of the agenda. Would any board member move the approval of the agenda?
Davis moves the agenda.
Noel seconds.
We had a motion by Davis, a second by Noel. Any further discussion regarding the agenda? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Potts.
Aye.
Ms. Noel.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The motion or agenda is approved. I don't think we handed out the oath of office for the new members. We'll have to attend to that at the next meeting. But at this point, I ask for nominations for chairperson of the Board of Zoning Appeals. It has traditionally been the Planning and Zoning Chair, which is Mr. Davis. That is not a requirement of ordinance. So if anyone would want to make an alternative or move Mr. Davis to be the chair of the BZA, I'll accept nominations at this time. Larry.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Davis.
We have a nomination for Mr. Davis. Is there a second to the nomination?
Noel seconds.
All right. We have a motion and a second to nominate Davis as chairperson. Are there any further nominations? Yeah, if you're not part of the board, I'd ask you mute your microphone, because sometimes your mic is going to pick up my voice and try to play it back, and we'll get that feedback we're getting now. So, thank you, Christopher. Any further nominations for the chairperson position? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Potts.
Aye.
Ms. Noel.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Davis. Andy and I had talked, and I'm a little more familiar with the platform. I'm going to kind of usher us through the meeting tonight. So thank you. At this time, we need a motion for a nomination for vice chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Would anyone be willing to nominate one of their members or themselves even?
Well, Carrie and I are both new, so I'm looking in the direction of Larry. Would you be willing to be nominated?
Yeah, sure. It's not like it's a tough job.
I will move the nomination of Larry for vice chair.
Johnson will second.
We have a motion by Shannon and a second by Carrie to nominate Larry Potts as vice chairman. Are there further nominations? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Noel?
Aye.
No, am I saying that right? Is it Noel or Noel?
It's Noel,
Noel, okay.
like the holiday.
All right, I got your first name right finally. Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Potts.
Aye.
Now this is going to be difficult because we need now a motion to approve the minutes of a May 16th meeting, and only two of you were on the board at that time. Would either of you two be willing to make a motion?
I move the approval of the May 16th minutes.
I second.
Thank you, Andy. We have a motion by Davis, a second
Davis.
by Potts. Thank you. Any further discussions or corrections? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Potts,
Aye.
and Ms. Noel.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody. At this time, it is time to hold a public hearing regarding a conditional use permit application to undertake automotive sales within an I-2 industrially zoned district at 922 North Swift Street. I will read the public hearing process and procedures. The public hearing conducted by the Board of Zoning Appeal meetings will include an opportunity for the general public and interested parties to hear and see all information and to ask questions, provide additional information, express support or opposition, and or suggest modifications to the proposal. The public will be allowed to participate and must follow the rules of conduct. Hearings are a formal proceeding, and at this instance, the Board of Zoning Appeal is acting in a judicial manner. So please maintain the necessary decorum. While everyone will be given an opportunity to participate, comments should be germane to the topic at hand and concise. Public hearing will be conducted in the following manner. I will do the staff presentation. Then I see Christopher is here to do the applicant's presentation, and I thought perhaps he may be joined by Paul Tanis representing the Dirks. And after that presentation, then we'll have a time for public comment. All speakers of the public comment portion of the hearing will be limited to 5 minutes. All speakers will be encouraged to present factual evidence for public consideration and to refrain from broad statements without a basis of fact. Speakers may provide written materials, which some of you did, but I see you're both here tonight, so I don't intend to read your comments into the minutes. I'll let you speak for yourselves. Where was I? The board will listen to testimony, but will refrain from engaging in a discussion with the speakers. After all evidence and testimony has been received and everyone has been given an opportunity to be heard, the public hearing will be closed. If action is to be taken by the Board of Zoning Appeals, they will discuss the issue in open session. During the board discussion, the citizens will no longer be able to participate in the discussion. So we will have to limit you to just participating in the public hearing portion of the meeting. And I've been handed a note that says Mayor Zeman is caller number 3 on my screen. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm here finally.
Okay, I will open the public hearing at it looks like it's 5:41. I could look on my screen. 5:39 my screen says. So 5:39 p.m. And the staff presentation, again, we're here to consider a conditional use application from BJ Swift LLC for the establishment of automotive sales within the I-2 zoning district at 922 North Swift Street. The other uses, the vehicle storage and equipment repair, are permitted uses and are not subject to the conditional use. The conditional uses then can only apply to the automotive sales, the characteristics of the sales, or the activities associated with that sale. The BZA meeting, tonight's meeting was originally scheduled, the public hearing for March 19th. I want to thank the applicant through the attorney, Mr. Tanis. They waived the 60-day requirement to allow us to reschedule the meeting and conduct it perhaps in a more safe manner in the GoToMeeting platform. So I do want to thank them for that. And the delay has been, I had to then provide new written and mailed notice. So we had, or published notice. We have to work with the Herald schedule. So it's been about a month, and I apologize for the delay. The planning and zoning considered the conditional use permit matter at their meeting on March 5th. They considered that based on the 17 standards that are included in the zoning ordinance related to conditional uses. Those are on page 9 of the agenda if you printed that off the city's website. The planning and zoning then has made findings of fact, which are included then in the resolution that's been prepared for your consideration on pages 12 through 14. The Planning and Zoning Commission then did recommend issuance of a conditional use permit subject to 5 conditions. Those 5 conditions being there be no storage or display of merchandise shall be conducted within the public rights of way. Now that can go unsaid because that's just the general ordinance anyway. So, but I did want it to be written down in the conditional use. All storage and display of merchandise shall be conducted on an impervious asphalt or concrete surface. So nothing stored within the grass where we'd end up with ruts and mud and other issues. The third condition is the display and storage of merchandise shall be provided in an orderly manner of rows and aisles. The fourth being that fencing upon the site shall not exceed 8 feet in height. And then 5, all flammable or explosive materials shall be stored, mixed, utilized, and disposed of as per the provisions of Chapter 50 of the 2018 International Fire Code as adopted and amended from time to time. Those were the 5 conditions that had been recommended to you by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting on March 5. However, then subsequent to that meeting and the mailing of the notice to the neighborhood, I did receive correspondence from Ms. Rubel and Ms. Keller regarding the matter. They're both on tonight, and as I said, I'll let them speak for themselves at the public hearing. But based on my conversations with them and a few of the other neighbors, I do believe you may wish to consider additional conditions following the conclusion of the public hearing. At this point, it would be appropriate to hear from the applicant. Christopher, is that you, or is Mr. Tanis joining you? Are you one of the callers, Paul?
I'm on the line, and so is Mr. Dirks is with me.
Very good. So you are caller 2 on my phone. Do you know who's going to do a presentation, or are you both, all 3 of you, going to add in a little bit?
I would just introduce that I submitted the application and the proposed drawing with the consent of Dr. Dirks and Chris Schmidt, and we believe that the conditions put on the use permit are, as previously stated, are acceptable. Dr. Dirks?
Thank you, Mr. Tanis.
So most of these things are reasonable and should be adhered to anyway. So we're good so far.
Thank you very much. I'll note that was Paul Tanis along with Dr. Blake Dirks. Christopher, as the operator of the business, do you have things to add?
I would just like to say that we would pretty much comply with anything the city or the neighbors would consist of. You know, we're here to work with the neighborhood. We're here to work with the city. You know, there's nothing that we want to do to make anyone, you know, annoyed, out of place. You know, they were here first. So whatever we need to do on our end, we will certainly do. So, you know, that's pretty much what I have to contribute.
Very good. Is there anything else that the applicant would like to add? Mr. Tanis, Mr. Dirks?
Well, I did type a letter and have a letter dispersed to some people around the neighborhood that were concerned with my phone numbers. And anybody that would like my phone number, certainly if they haven't received a letter from us, feel free to give me a call because we do any criticism or concern that anybody has around the area there, we will address it and I will address it. But I did put a letter out to people with my phone number on it, and I have gotten a couple calls and I've talked with those folks.
Thank you. Very, very, very good. Any other comments from the applicant?
No.
Okay, Mr. Potts, I thought you might have a question.
Yes, I do. Blake, can you tell us a little bit about what was in that letter that you sent out? Because I haven't seen it, and I'd sort of like to know.
Yeah, basically, what I did was I introduced myself through the letter as who I was. That I've been a practicing optometrist in St. Peter for 34 years. That my family and I have been blessed to have practices here and to raise our children here. And I'm at a point in my life where I kind of want to try to help others. And I met Chris, and he's a hardworking person. Paul just handed me the, so I don't have to talk off the top of my head. I explained a little bit about what Chris does. He repairs boats and stores boats and automobiles. That he's a hardworking young man, and I felt that I wanted to give him an opportunity to pursue his dreams and to also be of assistance in any mentoring type fashion that he would want. So I certainly was not in the market or in the desire to purchase a building of that size. But after visiting with Chris and some of his ideas, I decided that I would provide an opportunity for him to pursue his dreams as I pursued mine. I also mentioned in there that there would be no four-wheelers or snowmobiles running around the property on the grass. That my intent is that that building is peaceful. I understand that it was a factory before, and there were trucks, that big, large semis that came in and out regularly. That this should be a quiet facility, and if it's a problem for anybody, that I want them to feel comfortable calling me. And I did have a gentleman call me after they received the letter to express the concern for and concerns about the boats that were across the street on an asphalt surface. And I asked them, and I left number and Chris's cell phone number on there, and asked them to address it and feel comfortable to call us and to stop down and talk to us at any time. I should have introduced it. I should have said to you. I'm sorry I didn't do that.
Well, thank you. Christopher, could you mute your microphone? We're getting a little feedback from you. At this point, it would be appropriate to open it up to public comment, but I didn't see anyone put their name in the chat. I guess there's not that many I could ask. Sarah Rubel, did you have a comment you'd like to make? Okay, you'll have to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the work that the group has done. I did write a letter that I think you all received, so I won't read it. I'll summarize. I understand the desire to have businesses here in St. Peter, perhaps now more than ever, but I am deeply concerned about what having automotive sales so close to a neighborhood and so close to people who purchased houses when that was not part of the zoning when we purchased our houses means. So I would, if the board is going to allow automobile sales or automotive sales, again, not my preference, and I think not what people in the neighborhood bought into when they bought houses here. But if that is going to be the case, I have some things that I would respectfully request. I would really want to make sure that the public right-of-way is clear. I would really prefer that public parking lot on Sumner Street be kept empty, but that public way be kept clear. Perhaps more importantly to me, I am very concerned about any test driving of any vehicle in the neighborhood, and I would ask that all test driving be done in the industrial park. I, like Kate Keller, live on an alley directly across. I don't want vehicles coming down my alley, but I also don't want them coming down my street. We don't have sidewalks in this part of the neighborhood, so we have kids who are on those streets and people who are test driving vehicles in which they don't yet have an investment and doing so in a neighborhood in which they don't necessarily have an investment. makes me very nervous. So any kind of test driving, I think, needs to be kept within the industrial park. I would also ask that there be no paraphernalia attempting to pull people into the lot. I think one of the things that to me separates storage and repair from sales typically is that in storage and repair, people are coming because they have a known issue, right? They're looking for, say, a place to get their automobile repaired. They're looking for storage. When you're trying to sell something, there's much more incentive to pull people into your area. Automotive sales often come with loudspeakers and music and balloons and all sorts of paraphernalia. Those don't exist yet, and I'm happy to see that. I would ask that they not be allowed to exist, that there be no signage that we can see, that there be no loudspeakers, that basically the kind of noise that we have had from that area in the past, which has been none, be the same extent of noise that we would have from that area. And in other words, I think basically what I'm asking is that there really be no change in how I experience my house, my property, with this new use permit. I did not buy a house in a place where there are automotive sales. I would prefer to live as if that weren't true. If it is going to be true, I would ask that it be something that I just don't experience in my daily life. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rubel.
Lorraine
Edwards.
Russ,
Oh, yeah, yes, Mayor.
it's customary that when someone speaks, that they give their address.
Oh, yeah, please, Sarah.
Yep, I live on 811 North 5th Street.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine Edwards is put in the chat. Lorraine from 1114 North 5th Street. Lorraine, I see you're unmuted. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Kind of along the same lines as what she was saying. I kind of wrote down things, so I'm just kind of going off what she said. Was basically you already addressed the right of way, because it seems like right now when I come down on 5th Street, I cannot see to my left because there's all boats lined up along there. So I'm hoping that will be addressed, and maybe, so many feet back so that doesn't cause a hazard. Also, the increased commercial traffic will result in the increased noise pollution. So what are they going to, handle with that? How are they going to handle that? Also, air pollution near and around the business. I mean, test driving cars, using different all kinds of different stuff. Just will we smell different fumes? Not to mention the increased customer traffic using 5th Street to test drive cars, the safety concerns, because obviously we don't have the sidewalks and there's people walking. Will there be an effort to restrict the light pollution at night from any increased lighting, and how that would be accomplished? How about the increased traffic with the impact of the road, the weight of trucks delivering? Has this business basically be required to put up a bond of some sort to strengthen the roadway to handle those heavier trucks, or is that going to end up coming back to us as taxpayers? And for the wear and tear, what are going to be the projected days and times of the operation? Will there be increased street parking? I already addressed the blocking view of the stop sign, and any increased use of water and sewer. And can the system handle that? I think I've addressed everything. Let me look back here. Increased traffic, the weight of the trucks. Currently, the boats and stuff there are kind of blocking the street view to the left when you stop at that stop sign. I'm hoping that will be addressed. And you already addressed the screening, that there's going to be a fence. And the noise pollution is a huge thing, along with the air pollution and the light pollution. I mean, is it going to be really bright? And those people that live closer than me, will they be, having light streaming into their houses constantly? And I think that's about it. I'm just looking back through my notes here. The roadway to handle the heavier trucks. And expected road repairs due to the wear and tear, will that fall back onto them or us taxpayers? And yes, not to use North Fifth, but keep it down into the industrial area for entering and exiting off of that road down there instead of going past our, places up here within the residential area. I think that's it.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you. Mhm.
Mr. Brafke, can I say something quick?
It wouldn't be appropriate at this point, Christopher. At this point, it needs to be discussion amongst the board. A board member may ask you a question, but we can't allow the audience to participate in the board debate. So
Okay,
I apologize for that.
Nope, you're fine. Just let me know when I can speak, because I think I can clear up a lot of things as far as for this not selling. We're not going to be a car lot.
Thank you.
I think there's some confusion.
Ms. Keller, did you have a comment you'd like to make? Oh, I'm not hearing you. I don't think anyone else is, but I see your mic's unmuted.
Me?
No, Kate Keller.
Yes, sorry, I got kicked off earlier, so I hope that
Oh,
you can't hear me?
well, I can hear some of it. I think, are you both on your phone and your computer?
Hold on a second. Charlie, my microphone's not working. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, we're picking up part of it.
Nope. I can use the chat. Is that okay?
No, we're hearing you now.
Okay. Do you want to try to get me a different microphone? Okay. I can't. Okay. All right. I'm gonna try again.
Well, no,
Let me
we can hear
know.
you.
Raise your hand if you can't hear me, though.
No,
Did you hear what I just said? Okay, great. Okay, thanks. I'll carry on. So I did submit a letter to, I think everyone on the zoning board. So hopefully you can refer to that. And I'm going to speak against the conditional use permit with the understanding that it is probably going to be permitted. I just want to reiterate what some other people have said about how much the neighborhood has changed dramatically in the past several months. And I understand that it is zoned industrial, so that's fine. I am opposed to the sale of vehicles on the property for many of the reasons that have been mentioned by the other neighborhood members. So some of the things that I mentioned in my letter were no testing or operating of recreational vehicles off the property, right? So if they want to try them out on the property, fine, but I don't want them in the residential neighborhood. I think it would be easy for anyone test driving a vehicle to turn left on Swift. So I'm sorry, I should have said I live at 814 Swift. So I live on Swift Street, and I really don't want to see vehicles making a right turn onto our street where we have no sidewalks and many kids. I made a variety of suggestions in the letter to Mr. Willie, and so you can all refer to that. One of the things that I was also thinking about, though, is limiting the number of vehicles that are for sale. And it sounds like that might be happening. I also don't want to see an increase in noise. It's already started to happen. You know, there are vehicles that make a lot of noise when they're leaving the lot. We hear it, and it's a frustration. I'm nervous about my child playing near the street more than I have been in the past. And I fear that this will get worse if vehicle sales are permitted. I'd also like to let everyone know, and I've talked to Mr. Willie about this, vehicle sales are already happening on the property. There are vehicles with signs up for sale. I've seen them, and it's my understanding that the city gave Mr. Schmidt the permission to do the sales, understanding that this was just going to go through. So that's another frustration that I'd like to express, that we're having this hearing, but we all have the understanding that the permit's going to be granted. So I just wish that the Board of Zoning Appeals would think about this and what that means for residents, to know that our voices are invited, but that it's hard to really have an impact. My understanding is that we can make these recommendations and hope that they will be followed, but that we don't really have the power to actually change your minds. And that's something that is a big concern to me. So I hope you'll listen to all of us neighbors and, you know, just make sure that our neighborhood doesn't turn into one bordering on a used car lot. And I sincerely hope that it doesn't happen. But that is a concern. This is where we live. This is where we plan to live for the next 30 years, where our kids, my kid doesn't ride a bike yet. This is where he's going to learn how to ride a bike. And so if you could think about what that means for our families, you know, we just really hope you would take those concerns seriously. So I guess that's all I have to say without repeating what's in my letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. Caller 3, that's the mayor. PC shows up. I don't see anyone. I'll check the chat again. I don't see anyone else that wishes to make a public statement. We got Lorraine on her phone. So at this point, I will close the public hearing at
You know who PC is?
6:01 p.m.
Do we know who PC is?
What's that?
Do we know who PC is?
No, we don't, and they do not need to identify themselves if they don't want to participate in the hearing. So at this point, it is time for the Board of Zoning Appeals to have their discussion regarding the matter. I will address you one by one. We'll go through it a couple times, so everybody has a couple times to make comment, and we'll conclude when you tell me you're done with your discussion. I guess we'll start the discussion with Mr. Davis. You have questions or comments, Andy? And we lost Andy.
Hit the wrong button. My
Andy,
apologies.
there he is.
Yeah. I believe that there is a possibility of adding conditions to the condition use permit. Are there additional conditions that we can apply or add that would address some of the concerns of the neighbors?
Yes, you could add conditions as the board would see fit. And the conditions need to be related to the sale of vehicles rather than the storage or the repair. And the conditions are to be considered to be the minimum necessary to alleviate conflicts between the land uses. So that's generally what your abilities are, and that those conditions should be tied to the 17 standards that are to be considered with the issuance of a conditional use permit. So Andy, you were aware when the Planning Commission, they went through each one of the 17, made a finding of fact. I will note, you know, there's sufficient water and sewer capacity. And again, those are most of them contained and considered and discussed with those 17 standards. So hopefully that answers your question. Do you have other questions, Andy, or comments?
Not at this time.
Okay, very well. Mr. Potts.
Yeah, I have a couple of things I'd like to talk about. First, I think the case has been made pretty well about the problem with test driving in the residential neighborhood. If we are, and I believe we are allowed to add conditions to this, I would add a condition that would forbid test driving south of the intersection of Ramsey and Swift Street, that is into the residential neighborhood. So test driving only toward the city utility building, toward the north. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing for the residents to ask for. After all, they do have to worry about children in the neighborhood, and the fact that there really aren't sidewalks there makes that, I think, an even more critical issue. Now, I know that there probably won't be an awful lot of automobiles sold there, and that RVs probably can't accelerate enough to do much damage in a neighborhood, but I still think it would be prudent to try to keep the residential neighborhood a little bit separate from this operation. Second thing is I'm concerned about lighting, and that's come up, it was raised by the residents. Obviously, the owners are going to be concerned about protecting their inventory, but also protecting the vehicles that are being stored there. And that's going to require some kind of directed lighting. Fortunately, LED lights, like the ones we've just finished putting into town, can have their light directed and keep that away from residential properties. I'm thinking particularly about the folks who live up on Fifth, up on the hilltop there. If lighting isn't done carefully, they're going to get a lot of it there. And also the folks that live across the street, across Ramsey from the lot, would be having trouble with lighting unless it's very carefully directed. So I'd like to have some kind of an understanding that even though you said minimal, that some pains be taken to be careful with the directed lighting. I think that's very important. I also have concerns about the noise levels, and I understand that. And I would hope that we could come to an understanding with the owner that he'd do his best, they would do their best to try to keep that minimized. I don't think we ought to look forward to turning that into a policing effort, but people in the neighborhood obviously will be free to make complaints about that if it gets out of hand. I do also have concerns about customer parking and what plans have been made for that. The upper lot has been filled and then emptied and then partially refilled with boats. And the level down low, you know, not where the cars are parked on the lawn, but in closer to the building there, that lower lot, presumably somebody who's employed there is going to want to park there. And so there's not much space for customers to park with my understanding of what's going on now. And that would mean customers would have to park in the street. And I'm not sure that's a really good thing for the neighborhood. Even in the industrial section, that's a good thing. I don't think it's a good idea. So I'd like to hear what the owners would have to say about customer parking and access that way. I see that there was a call for an 8-foot fence, no higher than 8 feet. And that seems okay. I saw in the original proposal it was 14. That reminded me of a prison. But the 8-foot will be bad enough, but okay. And as long as there's only one entrance gate, it would seem to me to be that would be pretty well controlled. I had heard from the grapevine around town that there were some break-in troubles over the winter with vehicles that were being stored in there. So fencing is obviously a really important thing. So those are the concerns that I have.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor Zeman?
Yes, I have a couple of comments and questions. First of all, addressing Ms. Keller and Ms. Keller and her remarks, I am not influenced at all by anything that has been determined up until this point. My decision is made completely irrelevant to all the other things. And Russ, maybe you can add too. Hopefully not that the operator has been given permission to do this before this has been approved. Have you indicated that to him, Russ?
No, the direction that I had received was to accommodate the use through the public hearing processes. Okay. And then I did mention to Ms. Keller that a decision to deny is a very, very high threshold. And so that's what I explained. And if the board wants an explanation of that, I mean, you essentially have to find that there are no conditions whatsoever that could be placed upon the use to alleviate the conflicts with neighboring uses. That's what it was said.
Okay. So one of I believe it was Ms. Keller that mentioned that there are sales already occurring because maybe they're not occurring, but there are vehicles out there with posted prices on them. And if I'm looking through the 5 points, I don't see anything that this is even allowed yet because of the permit or because of the conditional use permit. But my concern dwells on a few other things. And I guess I'm going to ask, the applicant was aware of all of these things that were brought up by the other board? all these things that would probably be, because I know the owners were, said that they all seemed reasonable, but was the applicant made aware of this, of the requirements, potential requirements?
The owner is the applicant.
Right.
Yep.
But
The operator.
were the operator? Yes, the operator.
Yeah, Mayor, I left it up to the applicant to have those conversations with his tenant.
Okay. Well, I have a problem because I've driven by there many, many times, especially with this time of year with being branches and leaves and everything being taken down there. Today I counted 5 vehicles that were placed obviously for sale and placed on the grassy surface to the east side of the building. And that's been that way for quite a while. So if we're looking to put some trust that things are going to happen and need to be corrected, I would think you'd do that before you would come in and take a look at this and say, hey, were they not aware somebody might notice this? Because they're obviously sitting in that area, for that use. The problem that I have is, and I think, Larry, you said Ramsey, I believe that's Sumner Street, if I remember right.
Sorry, Sumner. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. The thing that I have with any of these, if we aren't even abiding by the stipulations before we've even approved it, what kind of recourse do we have besides calling the owners and saying, hey, this needs to be fixed? People need to be taken upon themselves to remedy these situations even before they occur, not after the fact, if they've been given guidelines as to what may be required. To me, the last operation that they had on Old Minnesota Avenue, all of a sudden, we're supposed to believe that the salvage-looking yard that they had over there is all of a sudden going to change into all in nice rows and the grass all mowed. And I had calls on that property on North Minnesota, Old Minnesota Avenue, numerous times because of things like that, and then they seem to get corrected. So I have a real concern with some of this stuff already happening, and we haven't even approved the permit yet, or the conditional use permit. And the fence situation and on the Sumner and North 5th Street, to me, those boats and the other vehicles, or especially the boats that are lined up around there, if I had kids, to me, it almost seems like a swimming pool situation, that they're just enticing kids to come and play on them and do all that kind of stuff. So one of the conditions I would like to add would be a fence with the appropriate setbacks. Then we don't have to worry about how far they're putting them back onto the right of way, or not right of way, but the easement. And then it serves as a screening, and it also serves as a setback for that upper area. Those are the things that really concern me. Like I say, it just I don't want to be turning someone down for something, but a leopard, changing its spots just doesn't seem to be appropriate, or that we assume that that's just going to happen, and because we have somewhat of a history on what that business looked like previously. That's all my comments.
Thank you, Mayor Zeman. Yeah, right now we don't have a conditional use permit to enforce, and if one were to be granted, then the permit is actually recorded at the courthouse, and so it goes with the property. But if were to be approved, it would be my intent to work with, I see Public Works Director Moulton is here, and my department would pay for Bolton and Mank to go mark the property line, and then I could have the boats removed from the public right of way. Right now, we haven't had that delineated to survey accuracy. But if you'd look at the packet, the overhead photo that's included in the packet, you'll notice that about 1/3 of that Sumner Street parking lot is city right of way. And having conversations with Public Works Director Moulton, the city would intend to do like we did on Swift Street, and we would actually remove the asphalt or the pavement from the city's right of way and reestablish a grass turf. That would be done as time and resources and labor allow. We'd also then remove the access off of 5th Street in a similar manner to where we've already removed the access from that Sumner Street parking lot that used to go on to North Swift. The fence was not a requirement of the Planning Commission's recommendation. It was if there was a fence installed, it would be limited to 8 feet in height. So if you wanted to make the fence a requirement, that would also be an appropriate function as you would consider a final resolution. So I need to ask Shannon, do you have comments, questions that you'd like to make?
I do want to make a few comments. I don't want to repeat a lot of what other people have already said, but I do share concerns about lighting, light pollution at night. Test driving, I think, in the neighborhood is not appropriate, and it would be very simple for people to drive down toward the Armory if they were going to test drive. My biggest concern that Mayor Zeman spoke about a bit was the right of way. I would prefer to see no parking up there except for maybe employees who wanted to use that as a parking lot. It seems unsafe in terms of blocking views for people as they're driving. That might be eliminated if it was just 1 row instead of 2 rows, but that's sort of an eyesore for people who live there and could be safety concern. I do share a lot of the same concerns that Larry pointed out as well. So I'll keep my remarks short because I don't feel like I need to repeat what's already been shared.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Johnson, you have comments, questions?
Yes, thank you. The first, I just real quickly, I have a question about the conditions that we could potentially put on this conditional permit. Would that apply to future conditional use permits on automotive sales? Or is it just for this permit?
No, each individual conditional use would be considered and determined on its own merits and characteristics. So if we were to approve an automotive sales in another location as a conditional use, it would be considered on its own without any implication from tonight's discussion.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Yeah, I don't want to repeat what others have said either too much, but just, you know, something new that had kind of popped up in the public comments from Ms. Edwards was air pollution and you know, thinking about could that be a potential issue. We've already talked about noise, we've talked about lighting. You know, when I look at on page 9, and when I look at that long list of, you know, no conditional use permit shall be granted by this board unless the board shall find each of the following to be present, I see, you know, I could name a number of those that to me bring up some concerns. And so I'm glad that we're having this discussion. And you know, I drove by there several times between the last 2 weeks, and I worry about the residential area, especially in the streets. I saw so many kids and walkers and pedestrians out on the street, and I'm really worried about the additional traffic that's going to be brought to the area, as well as, of course, as others have said, any test driving of vehicles. And then as others have said, the Sumner Street small parking lot, you know, I can't say anything new there. I have concerns about kids playing in that parking lot on the boats. There are boats parked there now, and so being considerate of that. Just in general, you know, if it were me and I've got small kids, I would be very concerned about my kids being on the streets in that area as folks are test driving vehicles and more traffic being generated in that area as a result of automotive sales. And I'm gonna look at my notes. At this time, I don't have any other comments or questions.
Okay, very good. I'm going to run through the roster one more time. You'll each have another opportunity. Andy Davis?
Yeah. Russ, did you draw up possible additional conditions that you would like to introduce to us? I mean,
Well, not that I would introduce, because I can suggest that you consider, but I wouldn't suggest that you adopt them all. But based upon my discussion with some of the neighbors, based upon some of the written correspondence, the ones that I thought may be appropriate would be, and Dr. Dirk said that it wouldn't occur, but if it is a condition, it certainly becomes fully enforceable. The use shall not include the test driving of off-road or all-terrain vehicles upon the site. The utilization of an amplified sound system, public address system, or paging system shall not be permitted. The parking lot access from Sumner Street shall not be utilized for the automotive sales use, and no merchandise or stored vehicles shall occupy that parking lot. And then if you wanted to consider hours of operation for the sales again, perhaps you may consider limiting those to occurring between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. in the evening. There was a question about the lighting. I don't know how we could differentiate the lighting that would be accomplished for the storage and repair and say that the lighting is established specifically for the sales function. So I think you may have, there may be some difficulty in trying to craft that. So again, it only relates to the sales of vehicles, because I believe there'd probably be appropriate to have some type of parking lot lighting if for security for stored vehicles. There is one sign that they would be allowed to have as a matter of right. So you can't remove things that they're entitled to in a conditional use, but you could indicate that that sign be unlit. So it doesn't cause any type of lighting issue. Then based upon what Mr. Potts' comments were, perhaps the test driving of roadworthy vehicles shall require that they leave the site to the north on Swift Street and return to the site in the same direction. So they'd essentially be using St. Julian and Swift to access for egress and ingress to the site. And then if you wanted to require that they establish some type of a fencing, you could require that. But again, the original conditional use recommended to you by the Planning Commission only had a height limit if there was a fence installed. And truly, they probably wouldn't want to go more than 7, because if you go over 7, it essentially becomes a wall rather than a fence, and we need to get some engineering and wind load data that's going to cost some money. So those are conditions that you could consider, as well as any others that you could come up to. Again, interested in addressing the standards in the ordinance, and again, being considered to be the minimum necessary.
Thank you. I find that
any other questions, Andrew?
I found that list very helpful as a good place to start. Do you want to, should we just go down that list one by one?
Well, why don't we give everybody else an opportunity to comment one more time, and then we can discuss those merits. If someone wanted to move a resolution and include those, then we could have a discussion after it would be seconded, and we have the discussion on a motion. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, it sounds appropriate. As far as lighting goes, I think we could stipulate that lighting used for the purpose of advertising be prohibited, such as searchlights or that kind of lighting.
That was a recommendation from one of your audience members, that you prohibit the paraphernalia, which I think, the inflatable guy that flashes back and forth, the streamers, the balloons, the spotlights. Perhaps that would be another condition that could be placed on that. And again, truly related to the sale.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else, Andy?
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Potts.
Yeah, this issue of the fence. I saw in the original proposal from the owner and operator that a fence was proposed for the area in which storage would be occurring. Is that correct?
This time I'd ask Christopher, you intend to install a fence, correct?
We would love to, just as the aspect of keeping kind of items secluded from visual eye, you know, whatever the city grants us or whatever the residents of the area are okay with is pretty much where we will take it, you know. So abundance on the approval of the city and the neighborhood is what we would like to eventually do, if okay.
Thank you, Christopher.
But now a fence is not required in this conditional use permit, is that right?
You can add that as a requirement, but the Planning Commission did not have that as one of their requirements. That
I
it be
would like to
required.
add that as a requirement. The mayor, as he often has done in the past, has tuned me into an issue here that it looks like there's been some bad faith on the part of the operator. He's been operating, it would appear, in a manner that's contrary to what's allowed in the zoning for an I-2 district. He's been doing it for several weeks. And so I guess this leads me to a couple of questions. One is the city attorney pursuing this because this is a violation of the law. The second one is, does this make it easy for the commission here to believe that there will be good faith efforts in the future? And I want to thank the mayor for sort of jogging my head about that. Because I'd noticed that, you know, vehicles parked on the lawn and up to the curb where there's a city easement of some kind. You know, I thought, well, okay, they're just doing something here, but you know, that's not legal. And so I don't know how to feel about this, but my confidence is kind of shaken.
Anything else, Larry?
No, I think that's okay.
Okay. I will say if there is a conditional use permit that is issued, it is up to me to make sure that that is enforced. And if the conditions are being violated, then a notice of citation and issue a violation will be issued. Ultimately, the use could be shut down entirely. So again, the sales part of that.
Well, but please, if I might, why didn't you do that in the last 6 weeks?
Because I didn't have a conditional use permit that had been issued.
Oh, but Russ, it was out of compliance with the zoning. Am I right?
Yep, I was encouraged that to allow it to go through the process, to allow it to operate until it went through the conditional use process. We tried to be accommodating to business interests and allow them to get through. Yeah, I was told to accommodate the use, Larry, until we could get through the public hearing process. So
okay, that's what Kate was saying that earlier actually has some substance to it, doesn't it?
Christopher, could you turn off your microphone again, please?
Things have been pretty well decided beforehand. I guess I find that pretty objectionable, Russ. I don't like it.
Do you have any other comments, Larry?
Oh, I think I've probably said enough.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Zeman.
Yeah, the only thing I have is I know the operator wanted to make some comments earlier, and you know, I know they just had a comment, but if they want to say some other things, I would like to hear those before we come up with even going to the conditional use, additional conditional uses if there are any.
Certainly. Christopher, anything to add?
I think I'll let Paul comment, but I would like to just say something real quick. We're not planning on being a car lot at all. I don't plan on having 50 cars for sale, 10 cars for sale. There is going to be a handful of cars that we store throughout the winter that people want to sell, and they're going to be cars that are cars of unworthiness of test driving. We're talking about cars that are $100,000, $150,000 and up. There will be no, I might have a couple of my personal cars for sale, but the conditional use is tied to the boat trailers. So like if I am to sell a boat, I need to have my dealer's license attached to potential car sales. I am not even focused on trying to sell cars out of this place based on maybe one or two. So I totally respect the neighborhood as far as them wanting no traffic into the neighborhoods. I don't want that at all, nor do I want to be known as a car lot for sale. We'll have a couple campers for sale, but main business is me selling some boats. Unfortunately, I got to tie my dealer's license in with vehicle sales because that's how the state statute kind of mentions it. So it makes it seem like we want to open a car lot. That is not our intention. If that helps clear up that aspect of it.
Thank you, Chris.
If I can make a comment, I don't understand that. I don't know the law, what the state requires, but how does somebody like Drannels operate in selling boats when they don't sell cars?
Well, they have a dealer's license. So a trailer, since the tires hit the ground, that requires you to have a dealer's license. So since this property is zoned, industrial 1, you can sell farm equipment, you can sell such and such items. It just doesn't say car sales. So to attach a dealer's license to this building is where we need to just specify boat sales. It should be more boat sales than it is car sales, because that's what we do. We might, like I said, we might have a couple cars for sale, but nothing that is going to be drawing people in with the crazy balloons and the crazy lights and sounds and people coming in 20, 30 at a time trying to buy cars and test driving through the neighborhood. That is not what we will be doing.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get into a particular instance, but today I saw 5 vehicles that sure looked they were for sale, and none of them were 100,000 to 150,000 in value. So that just kind of it just isn't there. What I saw today. Excuse me, today. That's all I've got, Russ.
Thank you, Mayor. Shannon.
I would like to hear if there are any additions from the owner.
Mr. Dirks?
Yeah, there seems to be a pretty big confusion as to what the company really does down there. The cars that are for sale are, what happens oftentimes is people will put their vehicles into the storage for the winter, and for whatever reason, family changes or life changes or whatever, they decide they don't want to have it anymore. They don't want to bring it to their homes anymore, and so they'll ask Chris to sell it. The biggest problem is the issues with when he repairs a boat and a person decides they don't want it anymore. He'll help them on consignment. Most of the concerns that are being expressed would be the same concerns you'd have for what the building is already zoned and approved for. Okay, it's, the driving around town. Well, it's already approved for storage of people's cars, and they have to drive their cars out. It's already approved for maintenance of vehicles, and they have to be able to run the vehicle. And so the place is already zoned for almost everything, other than the fact that Chris needs his dealer's license to allow him to have a trailer to put a boat on. And I feel kind of bad because everybody that's complaining about the place, I know all you folks, and you know me. If I thought it was going to be the things that you're saying, I wouldn't want to be involved with the building. I was trying to help a young man do something. I understand the mess over on 169. It was messy. He outgrew it within 6 months. This stuff, as far as the trying to go against a rule or a ordinance or go against the law, Mayor, that's not in my DNA. And if this thing got delayed, the meeting got delayed, we were under the understanding. Of course, I don't understand Chris's business. I'm the building owner, but had you had any concerns about those things being illegal and you'd have come and talked to me, they wouldn't be there. One of the neighbors didn't like 2 rows of cars on the top lot, or both on the top lot. And he expressed that, and we removed them. So there's only 1 row up there. You know, there's a point by which you want to be a good neighbor, but you also have to understand that that place could have big semis coming in and out of it, as it used to. I didn't know that there'd be this kind of resistance to it, but I want to respect everybody on that block. Lorraine's a patient of mine. A lot of you are patients of mine, and the last thing I want to do is to affect the relationship, because that's what life's about. But as a misunderstanding a little bit, I understand your concerns. I honestly, truly do, because of 169. And I understand kids. I raised them myself, and I wouldn't want my kids running around on those boats, for one thing. It's you know, it is a business property, but sales is not really. It sounds like it's going to be a used car lot, and at times it kind of looks that way. You know, there's a lot of cleanup that Chris has been doing. It doesn't maybe look like it, but that place has been used properly for many years, and there's a lot of maintenance that has to be done. The lights that are there, we've had people tell us that they're uncomfortable because there are no lights. And there are lights all over the lots that just have, for whatever reason, because it's been sitting there empty and not utilized for so many years, they don't work. And so we're trying to figure out the electrical problems with that. But so, you know, I really don't know what to tell you. I'm a little bit surprised at some of the comments, but I also understand the passion of people's homes and their children. I get it. I don't know. If you have questions, you know, Paul is more articulate with me, but I do want the conditional use to be understood, that everything that everybody's complaining about has already been approved for that building. You know, obviously the right of way has to be respected. We don't really fully know where it is. It sounds like it's further back into the property than what we've known, but it's been there for many, 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 many years as is. And if we have to change those things, absolutely they'll be changed. But I do want the board to understand that most of these concerns are not related to the conditional use. And I think Mr. Tanis would probably understand that more than myself. But
yeah, I think this comment about bad faith and such is also I think basically unfair. Mr. Schmidt was told that he could continue his work there until the conditional use permit process was through, to see what the consideration of the city was going to be on this. So it's not like he was thumbing his nose at the city and saying, well, I'll show you, and I'm going to do what I want to do until you tell me otherwise. That wasn't it at all. And I think everybody has to also understand that this was originally an industrial zone property. Onan Diesel was in that facility and carried on industrial working, tooling, and manufacturing for years. Under the industrial zoning, right now you could have a scrap yard at that location and it would be legal, and there wouldn't be any conditional use permits at all. And so I think, you know, that there's a little bit of when the city allows residential to be put in next to industrial, you're a little bit of coming to the nuisance. So, and then so all of a sudden you get it backwards. And I think the city would have been falling over itself if a manufacturing operation came into town that had 60 or 80 jobs there and was operating 24/7, and they would have said, well, it's an industrial zone, and we don't care if you don't like it if trucks are backing in or and leaving supplies or taking product out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're happy with the industrial. And so, and Dr. Dirks understood that when he bought the building, what its broad industrial use was, and it's almost inverse condemnation if you restrict it so much that you'll limit the ability to use the property the way you want to. But having said that, the use of the property has been set up so that it be accommodating to neighbors. And there's nothing in it about light pollution in the standards. That's not a regulatory thing. No, it is not going to be a used car lot that has the air-blown sock that has a man standing around. No, that's not what it's about. There's no conditional use permit for boat sales. If there was a conditional use for boat sales, that's what would have been applied for. You have to apply for it under auto sales. That's why it was done under that conditional use permit. Dr. Dirks has done a great job in talking to the neighbors and assuring them that he's going to be responsible for this. And yes, after the conditional use permit is put in place, Mr. Willie will have the authority to enforce it. And anybody in the community that feels that there's excessive noise or problems out there has the authority to contact the city police, and the police can say that there's disorderly conduct or public nuisance occurring at that site, and that can be assessed under that ground. But that's under those standards. So there's all kinds of remedy, but I certainly don't want there to be any confusion that Mr. Schmidt is thumbing his nose at you and doing things contrary to his authority there. Everything that he's done there was within the industrial authority of the building, and given the tacit approval of the city. Nothing was done to flaunt anything. We've appropriately applied for the conditional use permit and did so in good faith. We've appropriately contacted the neighbors to tell them what we would do, and we've expressed our willingness to accommodate. And that's what the city should do. The city should grant a conditional use permit that accommodates and also takes care of the legitimate concerns of the public. And that's what you have to do here. And Dr. Dirks agrees with the test driving off in the industrial park. It doesn't have to be on the street, but Fifth Street is a thoroughfare, and a lot of people drive on there, and you're not going to be restricting the driving on that street otherwise, unless you say no truck traffic on that street, or you put an extreme limitation on speed limits up there. Otherwise, any type of vehicle is allowed to drive on those streets. But Dr. Dirks agrees to accept the condition that if there's any test driving, it be away from the residential. He doesn't want to be a bad neighbor.
Thank you, Paul and Dr. Dirks. I think we're...
Russ, I have a couple of comments after that, if I could, please.
Certainly.
Yeah, Dr. Dirks, I apologize if you thought I was insinuating you were going to try to do some illegal operation. We've known each other for a lot of years, and that wasn't my thought. The thing about reducing the row of boats up on Sumner, that Sumner side there, well, it's been replaced, and it was still there late today, with a motorhome, a big motorhome facing, it's right up against the curb on Sumner facing east and west. So here we get again into this, yeah, he's not trying to do anything, intentionally, but it sure seems that there's things going on. The other thing is that the used car lot, that's now. Everybody's saying, well, it's not going to become a used car lot. Well, that's the situation now. But what about in a year from now? That, hey, the boats aren't going good, but the cars sure are going good. So one of the stipulations, one of the conditions would be if the operator is saying, just be a few vehicles, that we put a limit to the number of vehicles that can be for sale at one time on the lot.
Well, Mr. Mayor, am I free to comment?
I'll make that simple. One car.
I will not argue a bit that it looks kind of cruddy right now. Part of that problem is just the condition of the lot and some of the other things that are happening. And those vehicles that you see sitting there, those are not Chris's. Those are people who had them stored. if you have an idea on what we can do to accommodate and service the people that are storing there and helping them, if you don't want them at that spot, we've already talked today, as a matter of fact, Chris and I, about having them move to the bigger lot on the north side. Those are things we want to accommodate, Mr. Mayor, and I understand those clunky things that are sitting there, even though you and I think they look kind of clunky. They're collectors to some people. But I understand it. I really, really do. And I think sometimes you can restrict people to the point of, almost to a sense of confinement and stuff where you feel like it's unreasonable. But on the other hand, I think that it's very reasonable to ask that it appear a certain way. We will entertain that. And I hate to have so many restrictions on the building that when it comes time to sell it, that it's going to have problems. But right now, it's technically, I think, I don't know what the rules is about consignment. If they consign a vehicle, if he's able to have a vehicle that someone else is selling, I don't know if that's legal or not. But that's not Chris's car. That's their sale. Those vehicles that are right along the edge there. And honestly, I would entertain whatever you feel would be normal as far as moving those to the bigger lot. But right now, all those vehicles are coming out of storage. Those big motor coach homes and things, those are all coming out of storage because people have called and said we want to pick them up. So there's going to be a seasonal busyness there. Wintertime is going to be really quiet because everything's already in storage. This time of the year, everybody's calling. They're going COVID crazy, and they want to get out and take their family somewhere. And so a lot of those big vehicles are coming out of storage. Not quite sure how to address that. We can try to keep them on the lower level. I talked with the gentleman across the street about the big motor home that got parked there because we did move all those other ones there, and someone was supposed to come and pick up the big coach home and hasn't done it yet. And we want to serve the people that are inside that building too. But if all the neighbor has to say is that it's really a problem for us to see it there, and I know that Chris will try to accommodate putting it somewhere else for someone to pick it up. But I really do feel, Mayor, that Chris is trying to have a quality place. There's just a lot of stuff that has to happen in a building of that size. But I fully understand where you're at. I don't want it to be like that either.
Thank you, Dr. Dirks. Shannon, I think you actually had the floor.
I did want to say, just piggybacking on something that Mayor Zeman said, I do think it would be reasonable to limit a number of cars for sale or maybe vehicles for sale. But I just wanted to, if it's appropriate, share some of my thoughts because I am on the Planning and Zoning Committee when this came before us. Some of my thoughts were that I think I do agree that a lot of the concerns that are raised are not related to the conditional use permit. From my perspective, I was thinking of things like manufacturing, which would be, I think, more disruptive to the neighborhood in terms of having lots of employees coming and driving through and perhaps, coming in once in the morning, leaving for lunch, coming back after lunch and then leaving at the end of the day. That's four drives through the neighborhood. And so, which is not take away from any of the concerns I have about test driving, which I am less concerned about now that I know it's or would be less concerned with something limiting the number of cars. But things like big trucks coming through some concerns about trucks or effects on streets. If there were semis coming through the neighborhood, I think that would be even more disruptive. I'm more concerned about the right of way, having things be tidy, look nice for the neighbors. I think it's good for the city to not have a big vacant building. I think it's good for the neighborhood not to have a big vacant building, but I think we can I hope that we can put conditions on there that will make it better for the neighbors. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Andy, if I can jump to Carrie, and then I'll come back and we'll go through it one more time. Ms. Johnson, do you have something to add?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I had to move downstairs and try different audio. Okay. So, you know, despite what business was there in the past, I think, you know, this business and then with auto sales really increases the amount of traffic to the area, individual car traffic. And again, as I was there the last couple weeks, lots and lots of pedestrians, lots of walkers, lots of kids on their bicycles. It's butts right up to a residential area. So I wanted to make that comment. And then I also had a question about, Russ, could you kind of go back to that enforcement piece when you were talking with the mayor? So if this is approved with conditions, additional conditions, as we discuss this, I mean, what does the enforcement look like if it's approved?
Yeah, once the conditions are in place, again, I record that document at Nicollet County tied to this specific property. Then I would enforce it based upon my own personal observation. I would enforce it based upon any complaints that I received from perhaps neighbors suggesting that he is not operating within the confines of the conditional use permit. I certainly would investigate that, and if it was determined that it was, he'd be given an opportunity to correct the matter. If that wasn't who would be the case, then I would undertake an enforcement action with the city attorney's office and turn things over to Mr. Brandt.
Okay, thank you. So before we go around again, I just want to say that I'm very much in favor of conditions that have to do with reducing or limiting traffic in the residential area, especially test driving, as Mr. Potts had indicated earlier. So that's what I'd like to say, and can pass it on to the rest of the group here.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, some neighbors had worried about, and Russ, you had mentioned ATVs. Are ATVs part of this operation? I'm thinking about four-wheelers or snowmobiles, those kind of vehicles. Are they part of the sales or storage?
Yeah, they would fall under the automotive sales, which again, you know, includes boats, trailers, more than automobiles. Just so, yes, ATVs, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, go-karts, those would all be allowed within automotive sales operation. Any other questions, Andy? Okay, Mr. Potts?
Well, concerning Paul Tanis's comments about the lighting, it seems to me that it would be a good business practice to provide lighting where you're storing other people's property. Just, you know, a good idea anyway. But this is in fact a conditional use permit, and even if it's not required in an industrial zone, it seems to me that it could be put into the conditional use permit. And again, that makes me wonder about the sincerity here. And I know Blake Dirks really well, and I know he's a good man and everything, but there's some conflicting things going on here. And I guess I have to say I'm not impressed by the prospect of ATV and snowmobile sales that would be permitted under this, on top of everything else.
There's not sales regarding ATVs or snowmobiles.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
There are not sales of ATVs and snowmobiles.
Yeah, now.
No, they just don't do it. That's not part of their business.
It is not part of their business now, but the conditional use permit lasts a long time, doesn't it?
But you can't do a conditional use permit for everything that could possibly be put in there. They're not going to be decommissioning plutonium for a nuclear power plant either. You know,
please, Counselor, don't trivialize this. It's a serious question. Because, yes, I understand that, but it seems to me, plutonium aside, that
Mr.
this is a
Potts,
question to consider.
in an industrial park, you'd have the right to repair snowmobiles and ATVs. That's what they're doing now. And if you want to restrict sales of them, I guess you can do that. I don't think it's legal, but I guess you can try.
Oh dear.
Chris, can I jump in here from the P&Z point of view and correct me if I'm wrong, or other members of the P&Z, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're conflating two different things here. One being already permitted uses such as storage. We are only particularly concerned looking at the sale issue right now. And I think that's where some confusion is coming in.
I think I agree, and I think you are conveying better than what I was trying to convey, which is that yeah, there are uses that are already permitted, and we're just dealing with the automotive sales part.
So some of the storage of vehicles that we already see there are already permitted uses.
All of them are.
Yes. Ms. Johnson, anyone else have comments?
I have one.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Blake, Dr. Dirks, whatever we're going to call each other these days.
Just call me Blake. I'll call you Mr.
Blake, I trust your judgment. I trust everything that you've told us. Here's a concern I have, and it's probably ageist, but you and I are just a few days apart in age. And I don't know how long you're planning on overseeing your operation or this operation or making sure it happens. But you know, it's at some point we have to rely on other people or other means. So that's a concern I have. You know, if you were 20 years younger than what you are, I'd be less apprehensive about it. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, I've been starting to get called old a lot more than I used to. I'll say that. So I'll take that for what. You know, I honestly, I wanted to give a young man a chance at pursuing a dream of his own, and to help mentor him to become a better businessman. That's how this started. You know, they can repair snowmobiles. What I was told when I kind of came into this thing in a kind of an unusual way, but I was told that this building could pretty much allow anything that he was doing at the time other than the sales thing. And the sales thing is important, not because he sells cars, but because he has trailers underneath the boats. And so in Minnesota, in order to get the ability to put a trailer under a boat, it's clumped into the auto sales statutes, or whatever that is. Doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, it would be a lot more clean if it wasn't that way, but it is. But he's already able to fix snowmobiles and four-wheelers in the building as it stands. And so my job that I saw, and I really feel like I'm making patients mad at me, so I'm really feeling kind of uncomfortable because I've worked so hard to try to build relationships. But my job, as I try to understand it, is to have a facility that's one that's, for what it does, we can be proud of it, to make it a better facility, and to try to help a young man pursue his own dreams. And sometimes there's some stones that we trip on along the way that I want to help move for him, and those types of things. But you know, so many things that we're worried about, and I would be worried about as a neighbor, we can't do anything about them because the place is already zoned for that. You know, like Paul said, we could actually put a salvage yard there, which makes a scary sense to me. There were always big semis going in and out of there years ago. But the building, I bought the building quite reasonable because the previous owner couldn't find renters. They couldn't find a facility that was big enough to come into that place. And so, you know, I looked at an opportunity that I thought I could help somebody with, and it's really kind of gone sideways here. If honestly, Mr. Mayor, anytime you would come down there and have a concern, if Chris becomes who I think he will be as a business person, he's going to want to fix it. And I understand, but you can't regulate everything that you want to regulate in life. I've tried really hard to be a man of my word, and honestly, if I can't get this thing to turn the way that I think it should down there, that I think I need to sell the building, to be truthful, because I care about you people a lot. So this sideways motion on this thing is it makes me uncomfortable because it's really not the intent, and I really feel that once all these concerns are addressed, it's probably going to be a lot more peaceful there than you realize. If not, Chris is going to have a tough landlord on his hands. But I don't know how to put your mind at rest on these things, guys. But there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what is happening over there.
Thank you, Dr. Dirks. Anyone else from the board have comments, questions?
May I make a comment, or it's actually a question? So the applicant has been able to speak quite a bit here. Is it procedure to also allow some of the residents to speak again?
Generally, Councilwoman Johnson, the public is given the one opportunity. Others, if there's questions directly asked of the applicant, they are then given opportunity to respond to questions from the board, but they were only given one opportunity to make their base presentation also. So unfortunately, we have not accommodated additional comments because in effect, they become part of the debate. And so they're responding to what others have said or what commissioners have said. So unfortunately, it has been our policy not to allow those multiple complaints from the same individual. Now, with that said, I'm not part of the board. If the board were wanting to accommodate an additional comment, I guess I'd look at Chairman Davis and see. He is the chair. I'm just kind of administering. Andy, I will say that Ms. Keller sent me a message if she could speak again, and I replied privately to her that, sorry, but no, the remaining debate must be between the applicant and the board. But as chair, it's within your prerogative to allow Kate another opportunity to address the board if you wish.
Okay. Can we have a 2-minute time limit on further comments from the public?
Yep, I got a timer.
About the BZA. I think I'd like to have the BZA vote on that. Is that informal?
Okay, so
I would move
in favor of allowing a second comment from Ms. Keller, say aye. I'll start with Mr. Potts.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
I'm going to have a question here for you first. Was that with a 2-minute time limit?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Then I will vote aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Noel?
Aye.
And Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Okay, Kate, you're welcome to have another 2 minutes to address the board, so go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Okay. It's a lot of pressure when you're all voting, but I just want to say that this building has been vacant for the 7 years that I've lived here, and it definitely was better when there was nothing in the building. I'm perfectly understand that it is zoned as it's zoned, and I understand that, and I'm not opposed to that. But what I want to say is if what Dr. Dirks said is correct, that mostly what's going on there is what is already zoned for, then I would just say then the board should just deny the permit. And if we're all making making requests that can't be accommodated related to the conditional use permit, then just go ahead and deny the permit. But like I said earlier, I had this feeling like that it was an inevitability. And if I'm wrong, and I appreciate Mayor Zeman's comments and Mr. Potts' comments as well, then just deny the permit and let him go back to the business that is already happening there and that the property's zoned for. So that's my point of view.
Thank you, Kate.
Are there other
Members of the
members of the public
commission?
also? Okay. Sarah?
Can I speak? Yeah. I think I would echo what Kate said, and I would also say a lot of this conversation to me has been about trusting people, and I get that. We're a small town. But as I understand it, the conditional use permit becomes the conditional use permit for that property. I don't know who's going to own that property in 10 years. I don't know what business is going to be on it. I don't know what the market for various kinds of things are going to be for 10 years. What you decide tonight isn't just about what the business currently does. It's about what the business will be able to do from this point forward. I hear Mr. Tanis that, you know, these things aren't currently happening. That's true, but businesses change over time. They go into new markets. It's what they do. And so you are making a decision about what you will allow on this property. As you know, if you say automotive sales are allowed, and in 5 years that means ATVs, that's what that means. And the things that you put in place, the structures you put in place to protect the neighborhood at this point is the chance that we have for that. And I ask you to take that seriously.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who would like another 2 minutes? Okay, then we'll move on there. I think Russ, we've gone around a couple times now. Are we ready to take a look at some of the proposed additional conditions? You're muted, Russ, by the way.
I'm muting my microphone is what I'll start with. But I guess I'd start in asking if, for starters, you thought the 5 conditions that were put in place were appropriate, and then allow you an opportunity to discuss whether additional conditions may be appropriate or whether to grant the permit. Mr. Potts, do you believe the 5 conditions that were presented by the Planning Commission are a good place to start?
Yes, I do think that's a good place to start. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Pitt Davis?
Yes. Is that yes, no question?
Well, I guess my question is, do you feel the 5 conditions suggested by the Planning Commission are a good place to start and are appropriate, or would you suggest that one of them be eliminated or expanded or altered?
I think we can think of altering D, fencing upon the site shall not exceed 8 feet in height, and perhaps make that a requirement that there be fencing.
So you may suggest that fencing shall be established to provide security and screenage of the property to a maximum of 8 feet in height.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could perhaps expand on that one condition as you get to considering a resolution.
Right.
Okay, very good. Mr. Mayor?
I had that same point. I thought you said earlier, Russ, that 7 feet was something that would meet codes and not require any special situation.
Yeah, 7 feet is a fence. Again, if you get over 7, technically it becomes a wall. So if you wanted to limit that height to 7 feet, that actually might be accommodating to the owner. But that is how Dean enforces the building code as to walls and fences.
Okay. The other thing I have, and it's point number 2, shall be conducted on an impervious asphalt, and Dr. Dirks was looking for some kind of, he said on the north end of the building. There is a driveway that runs through that area now. I don't know if there isn't a lot of grass, but there's enough grass to put 8 different units on it right now. And it's more expense, but maybe they want to look at making that an impervious surface.
Yeah,
our
they would
display.
be, yeah, they'd be able to expand that as part of the development regulations inside or outside of a conditional use permit. The ordinance would allow, I believe it's up to 70% of the site to be covered with impervious materials. And just
Right.
eyeballing it, they may be able to add a little bit more.
Yeah. But the thing about it is that I think the spot they have those at right now, where they have, like I say, there's boats and cars and trucks and mini or not vans, mini or vans, not minivans, is probably an appropriate place to display them. But they're contradicting the grass part of it, and that's why I'm saying that, hey, it looks like the best spot for them for display. So they may want to consider that. So that would be something that, we could somehow phrase that.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Noel?
I do think fencing is appropriate. I would rather see no vehicles for sale in that parking lot by Sumner at all.
But we're talking about these first 5, though, aren't we, Russ?
Yeah, right now the first 5, and then we can consider perhaps the ones that then Pastor Davis asked me about that I'd scribbled down over the last
Sure.
couple of weeks.
I was thinking of that only as it pertained to, because at one point we had talked about fencing going around that lot. But yeah, I think that initial list is appropriate.
Thank you. Let's see, Ms. Johnson.
Yes, I agree with the list of 5 to start with.
So, the Chairman Davis, you want me just to go through what I had written down one by one and see if there's consent from those, and we'll just go real quickly through it then. One would be to require, and this is a modification of the Planning Commission, so this would require a fence of a minimum height of 7 feet be established to provide security and screenage of the stored vehicles. And you could limit that to the north parking lot if you wish, so there wouldn't be a fence surrounded the south parking lot. Would there be a agreement for that? And we'll start with Pastor Davis.
Yes.
Larry.
Only the north parking lot.
Only on the north parking lot, because I'm later on going to recommend that you prohibit the display of boats in the south, or display of vehicles in the south parking lot.
Okay, yeah, then I'm fine with that for the north parking.
Okay, Ms. Noel?
Yes, north parking lot.
Mayor Zeman?
I think we should have a fence on both. Because of the concerns, we're trying to accommodate the concerns of the neighborhood, and I think a fence around there, as I stated earlier, on the south part would also accommodate the sight lines and also accommodate safety for children.
Okay, then we'll just finish up here with Carrie Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to ask the rest of you, do you consent to requiring the screenage and fencing to encompass the south parking lot? And Mr. Davis?
Sorry, Russ, I got ahead of myself.
If there's no storage of vehicles or sale of vehicles in the south parking lot, then I don't believe we need to have a fence there. Will we eventually, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves in that respect then.
Mr. Potts?
Yeah, Andy just threw a curveball there. I'm not sure where my head is on this yet. Yeah, he's right. I mean, if we're not going to allow them to use that lot for those purposes, there's no need to fence it.
Thank you. Ms. Noel?
Where we are.
I feel the same as Larry. If we don't allow them to use that lot, no fence would be needed.
Okay, Ms. Johnson.
I think I might need more information. So we're talking about the lot on Sumner Street. And so what would that lot be used for then?
It would be used, I would envision it to be used for customer or employee parking.
Okay, so not for automobile sales if we decide that, correct?
Yes, that is likely to be one of the other conditions that you'll all be asked to consider, that
Okay.
it's prohibited within that southern parking.
So then I guess I'm not necessarily in favor then of saying that we should do a fence at this point, or put it as that as a condition.
Okay. So that condition would be that they're required to install a fence to provide security and screenage that would encompass the north parking lot.
Russ, I have a question. I guess I said something earlier about it. But so the boats that are there now, so we're going to require them not to have any boats up there? I mean, if I'm going ahead by what you just said, can they live with that?
Well, like I said, about 1/3 of that southern parking lot is the right of way of Sumner Street. And we're hoping to go in and correct that at some point.
Well, sure, that's the case, but you know, people are encroaching on easements and stuff like that now, and it's all if they can live with. I guess I have a question, you know, because that's all I've seen up there recently, unless it's just seasonal. But if they can live without there being boats up there, then I would agree. We do not need a fence up there. But you know, I don't know what's indicative of what's going to be happening for the rest of the year, you know, the summer or into the fall. So once again, we're talking about something that, yeah, we aren't doing it now, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future unless Chris can verify.
Yeah, if one of the conditions is that there be no boats or merchandise offered for sale or stored within that parking lot, yeah, we will make sure we enforce that. And when you come up with the conditions, if you come up with conditional use permit, they're going to have to make a decision: can they operate under those conditions? Okay. If not, they have to discover whether to go on. If they're aggrieved by your decision, if they feel the conditions are excessive or outside of what authority you may have, again, that they're not the minimum, their appeal would be to the district court. So that is an option. But if you put conditions, they have to operate by them if they wish to go forward.
Okay, thank you.
So then the consideration, thank you, Mayor. The consideration of an additional condition then that the parking lot accessed from Sumner Street shall not be utilized for the automotive sales use, and no merchandise or stored vehicles shall occupy the parking lot. Let me know if you think that is an appropriate condition, and I'll start with Mr. Davis.
Before you start, Russ, you said accessible from Sumner Street. It is not accessible from Sumner Street.
There's
it's
no
accessible from Swift Street.
And Fifth.
Well, I'm talking about the parking lot that abuts the right of way of Sumner Street.
Yes.
Doesn't have a curb cut there, Russ.
And then there's another one on the south end of the building that access off Swift Street.
Right, but there is no curb cut, Larry. There is no curb cut on Sumner. You said access off of Sumner. There is no curb cut on Sumner.
We'll say abutting Sumner then.
Yeah, whatever, or access from Swift.
I guess I'd rather say abutting Sumner, because north parking lot access off Swift Street too. So.
All right.
So the parking lot abutting Sumner Street shall not be utilized for the automotive sales, and no merchandise or stored vehicles shall occupy the parking lot. Mr. Davis.
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Potts.
I agree, yes.
Mayor Zeman.
Reluctantly, yes.
Ms. Noel,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, yes, but may I say one thing before we continue with these conditions as we're considering them? I just want to real quickly go back to page 9 in our packet and just ask the question to the rest of the board. Am I wrong in that we have a responsibility to ensure that, you know, this list, that list of concerns isn't present? And I think that there is a strong case that's been made for a number of those. So I guess I'm reluctant to continue to go through the conditions before really knowing and understanding that no conditional use permit shall be granted by this board unless we find that each of the following to be present.
Well, and
What I might suggest, Councilwoman Johnson, is we'll go through the list that I prepared, and then if there are additional conditions that any member wants to suggest based upon the 17 standards, if they feel there are issues in the 17 standards that haven't been addressed, and if there are conditions that could be appropriately applied to remedy a conflict based upon those standards, then we'll have that opportunity after we exhaust the list of the ones that I'd prepared based on the conversations.
Of the 5 you're talking about, correct? Of the 5 that we all agreed to already?
Well, I'm talking now about the abutting parking lot on Sumner Street. We'll talk about utilization of amplified sound, and we'll talk about test driving of ATVs and off-road vehicles, as well as then test driving vehicles to the north.
Okay, thank you.
And then if you think one of the 17 standards is not adequately addressed or hasn't been considered appropriately, we can have that discussion at that point.
Okay, sounds good.
Can I just ask for clarification? These 17 standards, we're only applying them to automotive sales.
Auto sales.
Auto sales only.
Yes. So we went through the 5. So the conditions on top of the 5 recommended by the Planning Commission at this point are that they install a security or fencing to provide security and screening of the north parking lot at a minimum height of 7 feet. The parking lot abutting Sumner Street shall not be utilized for the automotive sales use, and no merchandise or stored vehicles shall occupy the parking lot. So essentially, it would be restricted to employee parking and customer parking. The other one that I had scribbled down was the utilization of an amplified sound system, public address system, or paging system shall not be permitted. If you feel that's appropriate, let me know. Pastor Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Potts.
Yes.
Mayor Zeman.
Once again, we're getting to a point here where, okay, we've got this upper parking lot. This is the point I'm going to try to make. We're saying it's for customers and for employees, but can customers park down below? Can employees park down below?
Yes, but they just can't park and sale and display of stored vehicles on the north or in the south lot.
All right. Well then, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Noel.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
All right. They've indicated that it is not in their business plan, but an automotive sale would allow the sale of ATVs and off-road vehicles. So I scribbled down, the use shall not include the test driving of off-road vehicles or all-terrain vehicles upon the site. If you think that's appropriate, please indicate affirmatively. Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Potts.
Yes.
Mayor Zeman.
No. Where are they going to take them?
I suppose they'd have to trailer them out and test them at a rural location.
Yeah. I will stay with no.
Thank you. Ms. Noel.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Russ, can you repeat the question.
Yep, the use shall not include the test driving of off-road or all-terrain vehicles upon the site.
Yes.
I had written up that the use shall only operate between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. And again, that would be restricted to sales. So they could still repair and they could still store and receive stored boats outside of those hours. So if you feel it's appropriate or necessary, indicate as such, Mr. Davis.
Can I ask which point that
Excuse
is
me?
addressing? Which of the standards is that addressing?
That would be essentially the general welfare, the use and enjoyment of other properties. So some of the neighbors that have expressed the concern of trying to get kids to sleep and things of that nature. So that's one of the reasons I'd put that in there. But again, I'm just recommending for your consideration.
I'm thinking. I'm gonna say no.
Okay, Mr. Potts.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's realistic, so no.
Mayor Zeman?
No.
Ms. Noel?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
No.
Okay, we will eliminate that one. Any signage established upon the site shall be non-illuminated. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Potts?
No.
Mayor Zeman?
A caveat, do we have a size restriction on also with this, along with the illumination?
In an industrial zoning district, the maximum size would be 75 square feet. And one could be established on each street frontage. So there could be one on Swift, one off Sumner, and one off 5th Street.
Okay. Illumination was the question?
Yeah, you can't eliminate their ability to have the signs, but you can regulate whether they're illuminated or not.
Okay. So the question becomes, would you repeat the question then, please?
That any signage established upon the site shall be non-illuminated. And the site plan did show basically one sign on the Swift Street frontage. I think it's essentially using sign space.
But the illumination thing, I would say yes, there should be not any illuminated signs.
Okay, Ms. Noel.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Considering the proximity to the residential area, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the conditions that are being recommended at this time then, and again, Ms. Johnson will consider additional ones based upon the 17 standards if you feel that they aren't being adequately addressed, are the 5 recommended by the Planning Commission, and then that fencing providing security and screening shall be established encompassing the north parking lot. The parking abutting Sumner Street shall not be utilized for the automotive sale use, and no merchandise or stored vehicles shall occupy the parking lot. The utilization of amplified sound system, public address system, or paging system shall not be permitted. The use shall not include the test driving of off-road or all-terrain vehicles upon the site, and that any signage established upon the site shall be non-illuminated. So those are the ones that at least the majority of you in consideration of each individual one said that you thought was appropriate. Ms. Johnson, I'd ask you now if you think on page 9 there are standards that haven't been adequately addressed by the Planning Commission, please let us know.
So number 13, the use shall not involve any activity substantially increasing the movement of traffic on public streets unless procedures are instituted to limit traffic hazards and congestion. So when I think about this one, I think about the automotive sales. I know that's what we're talking about, but bringing in more customers. And I think we've addressed the traffic congestion or consideration with the testing, but do we feel as a board we've addressed number 13 especially?
I'll read that in its entirety. Let me read number 13 because there may be listeners that don't have a copy of the agenda ahead of them. So number 13 said the use shall not involve any activity substantially increasing the movement of traffic on public streets unless procedures are instituted to limit traffic hazards, and congestion. Would anyone feel there would be conditions appropriate to address number 13?
I would add a condition that all test driving of vehicles be done only to the north of Sumner Street, between Swift, between Sumner and Julian.
Yeah, we should have had that. So I forgot to add that. That was Mr. Potts' suggestion during our discussion, but the test driving of roadworthy vehicles off-site shall be accomplished in a manner directed towards St. Julian Street, and vehicles test driven shall return to the site in the same manner.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate, Mr. Davis?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Potts?
Yes.
Mayor Zeman?
Yes.
Ms. Noel?
Could you read that one more time?
I was kind of going up Cindy getting it off the recording actually, but the test driving of roadworthy vehicles shall be undertaken in a manner directed to the north, and test driven vehicles shall return to the site in the same direction, from the same direction.
Yes, I'm happy with that, but I wonder if we could reword it slightly to include their own transportation of vehicles. You know, if they're bringing inventory to their business, can we ask that they use the route that takes them through the industrial as opposed to the neighborhood?
Yeah, I think it's always reasonable to request that. And again, now the condition would have to be specific to the sale. So that's why I was limiting it to the test driving, because that is a characteristic of the sale.
Can I say test driving and movement of inventory? Like if they developed, if they started selling lots of automobiles and they had trucks of the Chevy Malibus coming in, could we restrict them to only come in on St. Julian Street?
I liked the language of moving inventory.
Here's a couple of points I'd like to make. I worked in that building 30, 40 years ago when it was ADC, before it was Onan. We had a lot of people there. They actually opened up that top parking lot when I was working there. But one thing about it, it was empty on weekends. But there was always a rush, kind of like if you go down to Lumacraft, what you see down there. That's the type of thing that would happen. All the heavy vehicles came from St. Julian up Swift Street. There was no reason for them. But here's the other point I want to make. We're saying, that restricting movement of inventory and that type of thing. I'm coming from out of town and I punch in the address on my GPS. Are they going to route them to St. Julian and then to the south going on Swift Street? I don't think they will.
If I could, I think Chucky's getting to the point of unenforceability.
Right. I agree. That's what I'm saying.
It would be really hard to control that. Probably isn't worth trying to do. I don't think I'd support it.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. How can we hold the owner or the operator responsible for somebody else coming in for the first time, with inventory or movement of whatever? So that's the point I would like to make on that.
But you Larry and Mary, you would like that applied to the test driving of vehicles?
Yeah, I think the test driving is something different. That's under the control of the business. And Chuck's right, people coming in or employees going in and out. I mean, that's not reasonable.
Mayor?
I agree. That's the test driving and that type of thing. Yeah, but otherwise, it's going to be like I say, there was when I worked there going across. They actually changed the stop signs when I worked there on 5th Street because of ADC and the amount of people moving through, because it was dangerous. So there are going to be vehicles there. There'd be vehicles there if it was an industrial site, which it is. but if an industry came in that employed a lot of people, so.
Ms. Noel, test driving vehicles, directing them to the north.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes, but I also want to say, just going back to my original point, it's our responsibility before we approve this conditional use permit with conditions that those 17 items are present. And so if there's no way to ensure that all of those stipulations are present, then again, I kind of want to go back to that because I guess, I know we're thinking of these conditions, but if we say, well, there's no way to put in place a condition that can control this or that, but yet we're supposed to ensure before approving the conditional use permit that all 17 statements are present. We have a responsibility to think about that.
Yeah, I will comment on 13 because the original conditions considered by the Planning Commission started out with my recommendation to them. And Public Works Director Moulton is here, and he runs the streets, but I would suggest, it undoubtedly will increase the traffic on the street, but would it significantly increase it above those that would be expected from the other uses within the area? And it would be my suggestion as staff that it's not that the roadway will be acting or carrying traffic above its designed capacity. So I don't believe that there's anything inherently with the roadway where the traffic that I would anticipate from auto sales in that location would exceed what the road can handle safely.
Thank you. So going back to the original question, yes to routing the traffic of the test vehicles.
Okay. Are there other standards, Ms. Johnson, that you'd like to have addressed by staff or by your fellow members?
Yeah, so number 3, and I will read it. In the case of existing relocated single-family dwellings that the proposed use aesthetically blends in with the neighboring existing permitted uses, and special attention be given to architectural style, scale, and quality of construction of the proposed use. Given the situation, how do you ensure number 3?
Well, that would relocate. That is if you're going to move a single family house into a location. So that wouldn't apply to automotive sales.
Okay, I see.
That's if
So
you
I
move
think
a
what I was
house
thinking
into
of,
a neighborhood, you want to try to make it architecturally compatible with the other houses.
I see.
And
So I think where I was going with
you
that
froze
was,
up on me.
Oh,
Could I point
sorry.
out that could I point out that this list of 17 has to be an all-purpose list for all kinds of conditional use permits, not just those for an industrial area. So that's why this thing about single-family house is there.
Okay. So then, do we feel with the conditions that we are discussing that we can also ensure number 15, the use shall not interfere with the use or enjoyment of neighboring permitted uses, and such interference is found provisions must be made for increased setbacks from property lines or screening of incompatible uses by the uses of fence, berms, or hedges. So that was one that I just wanted to make sure that we are covering.
Other members have a comment?
I do have a comment, surprisingly. If we're taking, and like I say, if we're taking Dr. Dirks at his word, and hey, there's something that may come up in the future, address it with the operator and with the owner, and hopefully we can resolve something like that. Once again, if we go to try to figure out everything that's going to happen, it's going to be just too encumbersome to have anybody do anything, I think. That's my thought.
Other members?
Yeah, I have a thought on it. And
go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, and there's no way that you're going to make an I2 zone, which is what we're talking about here, into an R2 zone, or make it look like an R2 zone. This is one of these unfortunate zoning conflicts that causes a lot of friction, potentially a lot of friction. And years ago, I served on the planning commission back in the 1980s, and we face this stuff all the time. It's where these zones come together, there's conflict, and so the conditional use is an imperfect tool, but it's just about all we have. And you know, we hope that everybody can get along. And I think that what we've got here, the conditions that we've put together, is a really good list. I think it's adequate to the purpose, and I don't want to put much more in if that's possible.
Other comments?
I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I want to raise the issue of limiting the number of automobiles being sold at any time, being for sale at any given time. Would that be helpful in any way?
Other members?
I would resort that question, or let that question go to the operator and see what Chris may think is a reasonable amount.
I think before briefly he said that. Go ahead, Christopher.
I honestly don't want to sell any cars. I just need the conditional use so I can sell the boats with the trailers legally. If you guys put a stipulation on there not to sell any cars, I'll sign it. I'm not out here to sell cars. I just need to get the conditional use to sell boats with the trailers, and that unfortunately comes down to being listed as car sales. So I don't have any intention of bringing any cars for sale if you guys don't want it to. If I got to put a stipulation of one, I'll do one. I just need it for my dealer's license to sell the boat with the trailer. That's all this is about. It's nothing about cars. This got really more confusing than it should have been.
Okay. If I can interject that's a very good answer, Chris. That's kind of what I was looking for. I know you had said something in the background before about it, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I have a couple other questions. Sorry, Pastor Davis, before I forget here. Chris, is there any other way to get that license? I mean, is that the only way to do it?
That's how we can fight the state of Minnesota on it. But you know, the reason we bought the building is because we thought we could do all that stuff based on boat sales. That's the only reason we had to switch it for conditional use. So I mean, if I can sell a car here and there, awesome. I just want to do it legally. You know, I don't want to cause any problems with anyone, and I don't want anyone to think it's going to be a car lot, because it's not. And 90% of the boats that are here are seasonal for spring and fall. So come 10 months out of the year, there won't be nothing here. So it's going to look like an abandoned building.
Okay. Good. Those are good points to bring up. I have one more question, then I'm done. How many employees do you have?
It's just me.
Oh, it is just you. Okay. All right.
So like to have that whole up lot just for cars. I mean, basically the boats that'll be there will be gone in 2 weeks when people come get them. You know, the place will look like a ghost town in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm done.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Noel?
You know, I had initially favored limiting the number of cars for sale. Based on his reply, I would almost want to say no allowable cars, because it would be so easy to say, I mean, not to question Mr. Schmidt's integrity, but you could certainly have 25 cars on there and just put them one up for sale at a time. I don't know that would resolve anything. I actually don't think he would do that anyway, but I don't even know why we're talking about car sales if he doesn't want to do car sales. I'd take it off the table.
Other comments?
Yeah, I would say to limit it to a certain amount, because once again, if we're concerned what might happen with this property in the future, you know, we're going opening another can of worms that if we don't restrict it. I would say no more than, I'm going to throw out a number, no more than 10 vehicles for sale at any one time.
Can I respond then?
Cars
10
or
vehicles,
vehicle?
including
Wait a
ATVs?
minute, vehicles, what does that include, Chuck?
The vehicle would be a car, truck, vans, you know, any of that kind of four-wheel apparatus.
But you know,
something with an enclosed compartment for passengers.
Yeah, but that would include RVs. Do you want to do that too?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many of those he has, but you know, most of them are storage. So yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with that. But if somebody thinks something different or doesn't want to do anything at all, that's fine too. I'm just throwing something out there.
Mayor, you didn't mention a number.
I said 10.
Oh, sorry.
Less than 10. Yep, 10 or less.
So the mayor would suggest a condition to limit the number of automobiles, and then I'll put cars, trucks, vans in parentheses, offered for sale at any one time to 10.
Or less.
To a maximum of 10.
There you go.
Is that just outside, or once the building's empty, can I have stuff inside for sale?
I don't have any problem with that. I'm talking on display.
Because in theory, once the building's empty in the summertime, that's where everything's going to go. So all the for sale boats, all the for sale, if I had cars for sale, everything would be inside.
So once again, I guess I get back to you just said, are you just talking about your own vehicles then? So then we're talking two different things again.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to I'm not looking to sell any cars. Like, that's not my business plan model at all. We bring 1,200 boats and campers into St. Peter spring and fall, and unfortunately they hub out of my old 1005 address, which was only an acre, and that's why it looked like such a disaster, is because we are the biggest storage facility in Minnesota, and unfortunately they come to St. Peter, which is good. So I don't want to sell cars. I don't have the time.
Okay, so should we say no sale of cars?
Well, I think 10 is fine, but I don't think, I'm not trying to be a car lot. I don't have the physical time. I don't ever want to do it.
But you just said, I hate to get in the middle of this here again, but you just said a little earlier, one would be fine.
Yeah, whatever you guys want to do, I'm okay with. So if it's 1 or 10, I just need it for my trailers, because I'll have 20, 30, 40 boats for sale. I need it for the trailer.
Yeah. I would second the idea that we limit it to 10.
Okay. Others concur? Larry?
Yeah, except that, if the guy wants to, it's inside and outside is an issue, and maybe it's just not worth going after. But I've been thinking only about the outside concerns. I'm less concerned with what he's got inside.
Right, and Larry, I would agree with you. That was the 10 is what I was intentioning that for, was just the exterior sales display.
So could we add the word outside to it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exterior. I would think we could.
Limit the number of vehicles displayed outside and offered for sale of automobiles, including cars, trucks, and vans, or those with an enclosed passenger compartment, to a maximum of 10 at any one time. I see Larry and Andy are shaking their head yes. Carrie and Shannon, you have a verbal statement, or you want to shake your head yes or no? Or
Well, I just have a quick question about, I know that maybe Chris can answer this, but the business does sell snowmobiles, correct? We're not talking about snowmobiles in this limiting of vehicles, correct?
Right,
I don't want to sell snowmobiles.
Yeah, snowmobiles then would not have that enclosed passenger compartment, so they wouldn't be included.
It's not
in
considered an automobile.
It's not an automobile, but it is considered automotive. Includes boats and trailers and cars and trucks, off-road vehicles, etc.
Okay. So Chris, if I can direct this question at you, I was researching your business and I saw that you had snowmobiles for sale, and so is that something that you do in the winter often?
Well, to be real honest, if we ever got snow for more than 3 weeks a month, maybe a guy would sell 1 or 2 of them, but it's just a waste of time and energy. He might fix a couple here and there, but I don't go out and market them. I used to when I first started next to the freeway, but you know, you end up sitting on them. So, you know, our business plan is storage, and that's really all we focus on, you know, and then some boat sales. Car sales, I don't want to do it. Snowmobiles, don't want to do it. Don't want to sell four-wheelers. You know, I don't want to sell airplanes. I just want to store boats, get them ready, and then when people pick them up, you know, get them out of here.
So, Chris, if I can ask, so when you're selling a snowmobile like that, is that a consignment type thing then too? Usually,
you know, maybe if I get, you know, we store them in the summer months, and a guy might say, "Hey, can I? Would you try to sell them for me? I don't have the time." You know, I will post them for them, and then, you know, help them get rid of them. But usually people buy them on the trailer. They don't want to, you know, I certainly wouldn't let people rip around down the roads up here if that was the scenario. But it's really a wasted time because people who buy snowmobiles, you buy them on a trailer. If they stop, you don't ride them. At least I don't, you know, but I will concur to anything you guys want to put together.
Mr. Potts.
Yeah, I think I think we've got pretty much the package together, and I'm a little concerned that we not try to micromanage this guy's business. It's getting a little bit too detailed. I think we've addressed in a constructive way the most important questions of the neighbors, and I know that many of them will not be real happy, but maybe some will be a little happier. But if there's nothing else to add, I'd really like to call the question.
So would you move the resolution, Mr. Potts?
Yeah, I resolve that we pass this. I'm sorry. Like to move the resolution number 2020 as amended by the committee.
And let me just briefly run through them one more time. The 5 that were recommended by the Planning Commission. The use shall not include the test driving of ATVs and off-road vehicles on site, no amplified sound, etc. The parking lot abutting Sumner Street shall not be utilized for automotive sale use, and no merchandise or stored vehicles shall occupy the parking lot. Signage established will be unlit or non-illuminated. Security and screenage fencing will be established encompassing the north parking lot at a minimum. Christopher, could you turn off your mic again, please? Because we're getting some feedback. At a minimum of 7 feet. The test driving of roadworthy vehicles shall be accomplished leaving the site directed towards the north and shall return to the site from that same direction. Limit the number of vehicles displayed outside, including automobiles, cars, trucks, and vans, or those with enclosed passenger compartments, to a maximum of 10 at any one time. Mr. Potts, is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Would anyone be willing to second Larry's motion?
I would second, Andy Davis would second the motion.
Oh, thank you. Andy, second the Larry Potts motion. I'll ask, is there further discussion? I feel compelled to ask one more time. And Chris, I'm going to limit this to the board because they've got a motion and a second on the table. So other discussion from the board members.
I wish that we were removing the motor vehicle sales entirely, since he says that he only wants to sell boats, and I think it would be a much more palatable for the neighbors, and he doesn't want to do it either. But
so Shannon, I'm going to ask. So Shannon, are you saying that we say he cannot sell any? Is that what you're saying?
yes, he says he wants to sell boats and campers and do storage.
I may suggest we've got a motion and a second. If you feel compelled that this isn't sufficient or that there should be additional prohibitions, it may be appropriate to vote against the motion.
I think someone can amend the motion right now, can't they? Motion on the table.
If it's accepted by those that made the motion.
Well, I think you can amend a motion on the table that's been seconded.
Okay, well, you have an amendment to recommend.
I will recommend a revision to the motion that we exclude automotive sales.
Is there a second? Is there a second? I don't see a second, so the amendment fails. We'll go back to the main motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion on the main motion?
May I ask a clarification? We're addressing lighting concerns via the illuminated sign condition.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And he needs to be able to, okay, I would like this clarification before I vote. So he needs to be able to have a conditional use for auto sales because of the trailer. So we couldn't limit no auto sales. Is that correct? Or can you better explain that to me so I understand?
Well, my thought was that he could have the license to sell, but the property that he occupies does not permit that particular type of sale. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
My understanding, this is Chuck, my understanding is that, yeah, he may not sell his, but he's going to have, it's my interpretation of what a sale is. If he's got people that are consigning vehicles out of storage for him to sell, that to me is what I'm talking about with this number 10. If we say no and these are sitting out there, I think we're restricting his potential business, which is our right to do, I guess, to a point. But we are also, if we do that, we're saying no sales, and all of a sudden the vehicle's sitting there. Well, we told you no sales. So I think we need to allow, if I'm understanding his business right, we need to allow for at least that to be able to happen.
I'm concerned about passing a resolution that says it's for the establishment of an automotive sales at that address, except for automobiles. It seems to me that that might invite action in the courts, but I think I'm very happy with what we have as a compromise, and that may even cause legal trouble, but it's worth a try. But I would resist, although technically this is out of order because we are supposed to be talking about the motion that's at hand, and the motion that was made was not seconded. But anyway, can we move on, please? And
sure. Is there any more discussion on the motion on the floor? Which, in my understanding, is the motion on the floor does not include any limitations on the number of automobiles sold. Is that correct, Russ?
It would included the limitation of 10 outside displayed.
Thank you for correcting me. Is there more discussion on the motion on the table? Are we ready to vote? We'll do a vote, Russ. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Noel.
Aye.
Mr. Zeman.
Aye.
Mr. Potts.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Thank you all. I will prepare a resolution for Andy's signature. I'll get that recorded. I will also then work with the Public Works Director Moulton to get Moulton and Mank out there to establish the property lines and get all of the storage then outside of the right of way. And then I will continue to monitor and enforce the ordinance and make sure that the conditions are being adhered to.
Is there a motion?
I don't have any unfinished business for the cause. I'd suggest perhaps it'd be appropriate if someone would move the adjournment.
I move the adjournment.
I'm going to go with motion by Davis, second by Potts. Well, I got to do a roll call. Ms. Noel,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Mr. Potts,
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Lorraine. Thanks everybody else that participated for your decorum, and it's always a tough thing to make some of these decisions, but thank you all, and thank you all for your time, and have a great evening. I'm going to stop the recording at this point.
All right, Chris, if you're there.